How did we get here? Was it something that we did? Surely we have never done anything that could lead to someone's death. Or have we? By action or inaction? Is that how we got here? Did we put Jesus on the cross? Do we continue to put Jesus on the cross? Then we promise to stop right now. We will do all of the right things. We will love. We will not only allow, we will demand. No, we will work for equity, opportunity, access for all people. We will no longer be racist, ableist, greedy, selfish. So, can we skip this horrible Good Friday if we promise? Even if we could promise. Even if we could deliver on the promise. We need Good Friday. We need to lament. We need our hearts and our bodies to be in agreement with our heads. Those who have been prey to injustice need to know that we hurt too. Those of us who have felt injustice need to know that we are not alone. It's not enough to say, "I'm sorry." We need to lament. It's not enough to apologize for residential schools and simply move on. It's not enough to say no more to racism, especially when there are so many who still benefit from it. It's not enough to say, "I'm sorry, I hurt you." It's not enough to say, "It's okay that you hurt me." It wasn't enough for God to simply say, "Let's do a new thing in Jesus." Jesus comes to the cross so that God can lament with us. And we come to the cross so that we can lament with God and with all those who have been betrayed, beaten, let down, killed, and left to die. We lament so that we can truly be together. You, me, and all of humanity. You, me, and all of God. We were there when they crucified the Lord.
Conflict see, watch from his grief away. Learn from him to watch and pray. See him at the judgment hall, beaten, bound, reviled, arraigned. See him meekly bearing all, love to all his soul sustained. Shun not suffering, shame, or loss. Learn from Christ to bear the cross. Calvary's mournful mountain view, there the Lord of glory see, made a sacrifice for you, dying on the accursed tree. It is finished, hear his cry, trust in Christ and learn to die.
They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter and James and John and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I'm deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand."
I wasn't there, but I have been there. I've been known to get weary and to get tired, and I know that other people's lives are important, but I get weary of seeing people struggling on TV. I don't want to hear how hard it is for other people during COVID. It's hard enough for me. I get tired of hearing how people are figuring this out and figuring that out while I still struggle. And I don't want to hear about another problem with vaccines or difficulties in other places around the world. And so I just turn the channel and I watch Bridgerton. I roll over and I go to sleep. And it doesn't matter what time of day it is. I tune out all the cries of the world around me. No, I didn't fall asleep in the garden waiting for Jesus to finish praying. But I have nodded off when God might have been trying to tell me something. When God might have been asking me to be awake. I was there when they crucified my Lord.
Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled." All of them deserted him and fled.
Look, I've never actually betrayed Jesus. I wouldn't do that. But there have been times when I figure that I know better than Jesus. If Jesus knew what I knew, then Jesus would do, all that turn the other cheek talk and loving the unlovable. It's just a bit much sometimes. It's like Jesus doesn't really know these people. I know better. I know that every now and then a well-placed lie makes things better for everyone. Sometimes it pays off to be a good bully. They say that Judas was just trying to push Jesus to confront Rome and change the world. They say that Judas just figured he knew better than Jesus. Sometimes I think that the church should be run more like a business, and that we waste an awful lot of time on people who aren't really worth the effort, I didn't get 30 pieces of silver, but I was there when they crucified my Lord.
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.'" But even on this point their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But he was silent and did not answer. Again the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You've heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him over and beat him.
No, I wasn't there, but I have been there. I've never accused someone publicly of blasphemy, of course. But I have been uncomfortable around people who are different. So uncomfortable that I have been not only unwelcoming, but I have made life hard for them. I've ignored them or gossiped about them. I have voted against them. I have pushed them away. Sometimes when someone challenges what I believe or what I'm used to doing, I just want them to go away. Rather than trying to understand them, I shut them down, shut them out. I mean, it's not like I want to kill them or anything. I just wish that they would go away from where I am and go somewhere else. Leave me alone. This is my space. No, I didn't accuse Jesus of blasphemy. But I have wished to hell that some people would go away. Whatever it takes. I was there when they crucified my Lord.
While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And he went out into the forecourt. Then the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. Then after a little while the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept.
As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things, and Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. And then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again, "Then what do you wish me to do with the one you call the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him!" And Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, handed him over to be crucified. No one asked him, not the chief priests or his bought judges, though fear would have deafened them. Not the governor balancing political options on his decision. Not the mob, pockets full of nightmares, stomachs full of poverty, voices brimming with bile, no goodness or mercy flowing over their cupped hands. No one asked him. But don't you think Jesus himself would have said, maybe he whispered it to himself, "Give them Barabbas"?
It was on a Friday morning that they took me from the cell, and I saw they had a carpenter to crucify as well. You can blame it on Pilate, you can blame it on worldview, you can blame it on the devil. It's God I accuse. It's God they ought to crucify instead of you and me. I said to the carpenter, hanging on the tree. You can blame it on Adam, you can blame it on Eve, you can blame it on the apple, but that I can't believe. It was God that made the devil, and the woman and the man, and there wouldn't be an apple if it wasn't in the plan. It's God they ought to crucify instead of you and me. I said to the carpenter hanging on the tree. Now Barabbas was a killer, and they let Barabbas go. But you are being crucified for nothing that I know. But your God is up in heaven, and he doesn't do a thing, with 1,000,000 angels watching, and they never leave a wing. It's God they ought to crucify instead of you and me. I said to the carpenter hanging on the tree. To hell with Jehovah, to the carpenter I said, I wish that a carpenter had made the world instead. Goodbye, and good luck to you. Our ways will soon divide. Remember me in heaven, the man you hung beside. It's crucify instead of you and me. I said to the carpenter, a hanging on the tree.
We are a people of story. And so perhaps today, more than most other days, the power of our stories becomes very, very clear. But before we get to that story that we have been working up to all week and really all season, first I need to tell you this story. It is a story that begins about 5 years ago on the first nice day of spring, when my son Isaiah was 3 and his younger brother Simon was 1. You may know them as the Lockdown Brothers. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny and it was warm and winter was finally over, and so it was time to celebrate. So I piled them into our double stroller and we went for a long walk towards the lake in search of ice cream. Now, these are the kinds of excursions that I used to live for with my kids. Ice cream by the beach, desserts with beautiful scenery. But a few blocks from our house, we started to come across something large, fuzzy, and very, very still. And as we got closer, I realized that it was a raccoon, and it was very, very dead. Now, I'm always sad when I see animals dead on the side of the road. And had I been walking by myself, I probably would have done something. Perhaps called the city to have somebody come and remove it, or look for some sort of instrument to pick the poor thing up and move it someplace where there wasn't as much foot traffic. But I wasn't alone. And so my very first instinct was to turn around or cross the street before Isaiah and Simon could see the carnage. But before I could do that, I heard Isaiah's sweet little voice pipe up, "Mama, look, that raccoon is sleeping. Shh, don't wake her up." Now, it was fairly obvious that this raccoon had met a violent end. And I could have left it. I could have said, "Yep, funny that," and we'd have been on our way. But I thought about our old man cat and how he was probably only going to be with us for another couple years. And I thought about my father, who had only recently been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and we were still waiting to hear about his prognosis. And then I thought that a conversation about a dead raccoon was probably going to be the gentlest introduction to a conversation about death and loss that I could possibly hope to have. Because better a dead raccoon than a beloved family pet or a grandparent. And so I took a deep breath. Isaiah, honey, that raccoon is not sleeping. That raccoon is dead. Isaiah was quiet for a moment, pondering this. He had watched movies before where characters had died. I mean, every single Disney movie seems to feature an orphan or two. But for Isaiah, the solution was really quite simple. Kiss her better.
Pardon me. Just kiss her better, Mama, like you do with me. And staring at that bleeding, broken raccoon, my heart cracked right then and there. Because, of course, no matter how powerful or how healing my kisses are, they cannot fix a dead raccoon. Honey, that raccoon is dead, and dead is forever. And then we went over what happens when people and animals die. Their heart stops beating, their lungs stop breathing, and their body stops moving. Isaiah was a little bit concerned, so together we felt his heart, and we felt his lungs, and we felt his body, and he did a little dance, and we assured ourselves that he was indeed very much alive. And then we did the same for me. This was all developmentally appropriate stuff, but it wasn't lost on me how a day that started out with celebration and ice cream had suddenly become something far, far deeper. And still, he didn't understand why I wouldn't kiss the raccoon, why I wouldn't at least try. And I finally had to tell him that Mama's kisses can't fix everything. They can't fix dead. And that, I think, was the hardest part of the whole scene. Understanding that dead is forever is one thing. Suddenly being confronted that there are just some things Mama can't fix on her own. That is where the heartbreak lived. So here we are. We started our week with a celebration. We started our week with a parade and singing and shenanigans with the family dog, with Canadian palm leaves and so much joy. Because Jesus entered Jerusalem like a rock star. It was a cheeky gesture, and he did so at the same time that Pilate was holding his own parade on the opposite end of the city. Except for Pilate, it was a demonstration of imperial might and strength. Jesus enters with the hopes and dreams of his people paving the way before him. But a lot of things happened over the next few days. Judas betrayed his friend. The religious elite, some of whom had actually been trying to protect Jesus, became nervous. Jesus and the crowds who surrounded him had become too dangerous. And so, in keeping with the circumstances, the context, and the time, the end result is torture and execution at the hands of the Roman state. A bleeding and broken man hanging from a cross, the cross. It is the crux of our story, and Christians have spent nearly 2,000 years trying to work out the meaning of it all. Now, Isaiah spent months, literally months, working out his feelings about this dead raccoon experience. One day we went to the library and he asked if he could take home a book about raccoons. We couldn't find any, so we asked the library worker for help. And when she was successful and came back looking triumphant, Isaiah looked at the book and then at her and asked, "Is this a book about alive raccoons? Because I really need a book about dead raccoons." so deep and honest was this 3-year-old's desire to make sense of what seemed totally outside of his conceptual framework. How is it possible that my mama, who has always made everything better with a kiss or a hug or a tickle, cannot fix this dead raccoon? How is it possible that a God whose chosen people are aching can send their anointed one not to vanquish, but rather to a brutal and shameful death? I started to go through the books in my house and have taken account of the different interpretations of what this scandalous and violent death means. And there are just too many understandings to list here. Just so many books. Books written by authors who believed that the world and everybody in it was so bad that God needed somebody to die in order to pay for it all. Books by authors who believe that we have here a man with so much love and truth to impart that those in power felt threatened, and so they killed him. With 2 ministers sharing one house and more than a few retiring clergy friends, we have rather a lot of books. More books than we have shelf space for. So many authors writing so many books, trying to make sense of the death of this one man. But then I found this book. It starts out, "Once upon a time, there was a dead raccoon." And I was reminded of that conversation 5 years ago, and how much Isaiah had to work through, and how part of working it out for him was writing about it. He wrote an entire series of stories trying to make sense of the death of this one raccoon. And before I sang him a lullaby at night, together we would make up stories about raccoons. Sometimes they were alive, and sometimes they weren't. Because the whole thing moved him. The raccoon was killed. She didn't do anything wrong, but the world killed her anyway. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. It probably really hurt. And Mama couldn't make it better. So he wrote about it to make sense of it. The Gospel according to Isaiah. Now I'm willing to wager that most of you know that this is not where our story ends. And I promise that Norm's sermon on Sunday is not going to be titled Roadkill and the Resurrection. But it is where we leave things for today. Jesus doesn't do anything wrong, but the world kills him anyway. It isn't right. It isn't fair. It probably really hurt. And his mama, holy or otherwise, can't make it better. At least not in the way his friends want or expect.
Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. And after mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his clothes on him. And then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. And then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each would take. I didn't pick up Jesus' cross. I didn't come forth from the crowd to help carry his burden. But when my neighbor's sister died and they could have no funeral because of COVID, I joined them in their driveway with some candles, some tears, and some prayers. I helped to carry their burden of grief. I hugged my child when they thought the world was coming to an end. I have given time and money to those who just need to know that they have not been forgotten by the world. I went to the mosque to show my love and support when their property was vandalized. I struggle to let go of privilege, to decolonize my way of being, and to truly open myself, to open both the doors that I pass through easily and the tables that have been set for me, so that others may find space, nourishment, agency, and opportunity. I forgive when I have been wronged. I seek forgiveness when I have wronged others. I didn't help to carry Jesus' cross, but I do my best to carry on his ministry. It hurts. It's hard. But I was there. I am still there when they crucify my Lord. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads, saying, "Ah, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And at 3:00 Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was God's Son." Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. We lament that we might rise again with Jesus, with us all, with all of creation.